So we learned yesterday that through this Tzeduki Kohen pouring water on his feet, instead of doing Nisuach HaMayim on the Mizbeach, everyone started pelting him with their esrogim and perhaps with rocks also, like Rashi seems to imply. It damaged the Mizbeach, and as a result, they couldn't use it anymore. One of the morals of the story is that even when your broigus is justifiable, you have to realize that there could be very destructive results from that kind of violent reaction. So you see that even though they were justified in attacking the Tzeduki, but look what happened is that they were overzealous, and the Mizbeach couldn't be used anymore, at least for a period of time. Let's go weiter on DAF Mem Tes Amud Aleph on the third line. Amar Rabba bar Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan Shisin Misheishes Yemei Bereishis Nivru. So we have this principle that we're going to see a machlokus in the Gemara today between two Tanoim. One is the Chachamim and the other one is Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok. What happens to the libation, whether it was wine or water? Where did it go after you poured it down the drain on top of the Mizbeach? So we know that it went down through a tube or some kind of drain system that was built into the Mizbeach. Rashi says it poured out. You poured it in a drain on the side of the Mizbeach, and then that poured onto the surface of the Mizbeach, and then on the Mizbeach somewhere there was a drain, and it went down to the bottom, to the floor. Where did it go after that? So according to this opinion in the Gemara, there were subterraneous caverns that the drain opened up into, and this wine or water went all the way down to some depth, down to what we call the Tahom. It went down all the way down to some bottomless pit, down all the way down into the greatest depths of the earth. And these pits, or this depth, this Tahom, was created from the 6 days of creation. Shenamar chamukei yerechayich kimo chalaim ma'aseh yedei aman. In Shir Hashirim, it says that the hidden parts of your thigh are like chalaim, some type of adornment. Ma'aseh yedei aman, they are the act of an artisan. So chamukei yerechayich, the hidden parts of your thigh, elu hashisin. The word yerech means the flank of the Mizbeach also. That's an allusion to. So the hidden parts of the Mizbeach refers to the subterraneous caverns underneath, or the drain system. Kimo chalalim, echalaim. They are like these chalaim adornments. Shemechulalim v'yordim ad tahom. That these drains go all the way down subterraneously, down to the very depths. Ma'aseh yedei aman, that they are active, the artisan. Zu ma'aseh yedei unuso shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this last part of the pasuk implies that the great artisan in heaven, God himself, fashioned these caverns in order to be able to collect the wine and the water. Tana devei Rabbi Yishmael Bereshis al tikri Bereshis ela Barashis. Do not read it as the word Bereshis, but rather God created the shis. He created these depths for the wine to flow. Tanya Rabbi Yossi Omer Shisim Mechulolam V'Yordim Ad Tahom. We have a similar brisa from Rabbi Yossi who says that these drains went all the way down to the Tahom, down to the very depths. Shenemar Ashirana Liyadidi Shiras Dodi Lecharmo. This is a pasuk in Yeshaya. I will sing a song to my beloved, a song of my beloved for his vineyard. Kerem Hayil Liyadidi. My beloved had a vineyard. Bakeren Ben Shemen. It was in a choice place. That the Keren Ben Shemen means that it was in a place that was in Eretz Yisrael, that was the fattest of all the lands. Vayazkehu vayiskalehu vayitaehu sorek. And he built upon it, and he removed all of the stones, and he planted a sorek, which is a reference to very, very high quality plants, very high quality vines. Vayivan Migdal B'socho, and he built a tower in this land. The Gam Yekev Chatzav Bo, and he dug a pit in this area. So this is all descriptive of what the prophet is describing in some kind of metaphor. So the Gemara explains what the metaphor is. Vayitaehu sorek zebeis hamikdash, that my friend planted a sorek, which refers to this high quality plant. This refers to the temple. Vayivan migdal besocho ze mizbech. He built a tower on it. This refers to the mizbech. V'gam yekev chotzav bo elu hashisin, and he dug a pit in it. This refers to the subterraneous caverns below the Beis Hamikdash where the wine would flow. Tanya, Amar Rebbe Lazar Bar Tzadok. So now, all up until now is opinion number 1. Now we're going to opinion number 2, which disagrees and says that when you poured the libations on the Mizbeach, they did not go down to the Tahom. Those libations got trapped somewhere between the Mizbeach and the Kevesh. The Mizbeach, the Kevesh is the ramp going up to the Mizbeach. There was a narrow crawl space between the Kevesh and the Mizbeach. We know this because the Gemara in Zvachim describes that you had to be able to throw something from the Kevesh to the Mizbeach. So there was a small gap. It was covered with a plank. And as we'll see, we'll explain just a second what happened. So, Amar Rebbe Lazar Bar Tzadok, Lul Katan Haya Ben Kevesh La Mizbeach B'Marova Shel Kevesh. That there, on this plank that covered the space, the gap between the ramp and the Mizbeach, there was a little trap door that you could open up. And ve'echas l'shivim shana pirchei kuhuna yordim l'shamu malakta misham yain karush shedome li'igulei devela. And once every 70 years, they would lower a little Kohen kid down through this trap door, almost like a Charles Dickens novel. You know, they would lower the boy down through the chimney sweep, you know, down to this place, this dark, danky place, and he would find all of the wine that had been poured over 70 years actually drained onto the floor into this area. It was completely enclosed, and so the wine just basically coagulated, it evaporated, and you were left with this sticky mass that was like fig cakes, describing it. He would pull it out off of the ground, bring it out, and then then they would have to burn it with kedusha. They would build a bonfire somewhere in the Azara, and they would burn it there because it had to be treated with kedusha. Shenamar bakodesh haseich nesech shechar Hashem, as it says, in the holy you shall pour the libations to Hashem. So kishem shenisucho b'kedusha kach sreifaso b'kedusha. Even though the pasuk is only talking about libation, we learn that just like the pouring has to be done with kedusha, so too does its burning have to be done b'kedusha. My mashma, where do you see from the pasuk that it's talking anything about burning? Amar Ravina Asya Kodesh Kodesh. It's a Gzeira Shava. Ksiv hacha b'kodesh hasech nesech v'chesiv hasam esaraftos anasar ba'esh lo yechel ki kodeshu. The Torah says that both when it comes to sacrificial meat that's left over overnight, you have to burn it, and it uses the word Kodesh, and it uses the word Kodesh by the libations. So you see that. So therefore you see that just like the leftover karbanos have to be burned, so too the leftover libations have to be burned. Now, Kaman Azla Haditznan. So according to whom does the following Mishnah go? So basically we have this machlokis between the Chachamim and Rabbi Lazar Bar Tzadok as to what happened to the libations. Rabbi Lazar Bar Tzadok says they went down below ground, never to be heard or seen from again. According to Rabbi Lazar Bar Tzadok, the wine all collected on the floor. And every 70 years you'd be able to pull it up and get this sticky stuff and just burn it. So let's look at the following Mishnah. It says, Nesachim batchila mo'alin bahen, yardu l'shisin in mo'alin bahen. That initially if you have wine that's set aside for libations, it's subject to me'ila. If you use it for personal use, you're liable. But once you've poured it down the drain, you're no longer liable. So Lema Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzadoki. It must be like Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzadok because it's only relevant for him. According to the Chachamim, this is a non sequitur. Once you pour it down the drain, it's never to be seen from again. So how could it even be subject to me'ila? So the Gemara says, no. Afilu tema rabbanan b'de'iklat. It's very possible that it's a theoretical issue for the Chachamim as well, because in theory, a guy could go below the temple floor and rig some kind of apparatus to collect the wine that flows down from the Mizbeach. And the question then is, could he drink it? Could he use it? Right? That would be the question. Right? So it is possible to collect it, even though it's going down to the Tahom. V'ika da'amri, others learn, Lema Rabbanan Hivalo Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzadok. Some say just the opposite. Let's say that this goes according to the Chachamim and not like Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzadok. Di'i Rabbi Elazar Akati B'Kedusha Sayo Kaimi. Because the Mishnah said that it's not subject to me'ila, but you see, according to Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzadok, the very fact that you have to burn it in a state of kedusha implies that its holiness is still intact, and therefore it would be subject to me'ila. according to Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzadok. So the Gemara says, no, afilu tema Rabbi Elazar, ein lecha davar shenasa mitzvasu mo'olin bo. No, because it really, even though Rabbi Elazar Bar Tzadok says that you have to burn that coagulated wine, but it's not subject to me'ila. It doesn't have that same level of kedusha, such that if you used it, you'd have to bring a carbon me'ilo. The reason is because anytime a mitzvah has already been done with an object, it's not subject to me'ila anymore. So once you did the mitzvah of nisuch, of libation, it can't be subject to me'ila anymore. But you still have to burn. You still have to treat it with kedusha. Amar Reish Lakish, Bizman shemenaschin yain al gabi mizbeach pokikin es hashisin lekayim hashenemar bakodesh haseich nesech shechar lashem. Reish Lakish says that when you pour the wine in that drain on the side of the mizbeach and it spreads out and diffuses onto the surface of the altar, you have to plug up the drain that is on the mizbeach where the wine drains down to the floor. And the reason why you have to do that is based on this pasuk, because it says, in the holiness you shall pour nesech shechar lashem. And somehow in that pasuk we're going to see that there has to be an appearance of wine that is spread out with abundance on the mizbeach. And that's why you have to plug up the hole. Because if you don't plug up the drain that's on the mizbeach floor, on the surface of the mizbeach, it'll go straight down and no one will see the wine. What we want is we want to pour the wine, let it spread out on the surface of the mizbeach and say, wow, that's a gezunta amount of wine. And then you unplug the drain and it'll drain down into the floor. So my mashma, where do you see from this pasuk that there's a desirability to see the wine in its abundance? Amar Rav Papa, Sheichar Lashon Shesiya Lashon Sivia Lashon Shechrus, because the word is Sheichar. Sheichar is a word that used in the Torah for an intoxicant, but it also implies the following three things. It implies, Sheichar implies something that you drink, it implies something that sates you, and it also implies something that intoxicates. And in order for it to appear that it's in abundance and it has intoxicating power, you want to be able to see it in a collected form. You don't want to just let it just drain down. So Amar Rav Papa Shma Mina Kisava Inish Chamra Migrone Sava. Rav Papa says we can infer from this that when a person is wants to get satisfied from wine, it's very different from food. Food, you can eat small quantities, but eventually, if you eat small quantities for an extended period of time, your belly becomes full and you become satiated. Whereas by contrast, when you're talking about wine, no matter how much you drink, if you just sip, 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 it'll never satisfy you. It'll never give you that geschmack that you're supposed to get from wine. So what you need to do is you need to put a big gulp in your mouth, and that's the thing that'll to really feel the effects of the wine, perhaps of the alcohol. Amar Rava tzorva me rabbanan delo nafisha lechamra ligma gemuei. And that's why Rava said that if you're a Talmud Chacham and you're on a limited budget, like you're learning in Koilel, and you're on a limited budget, you only have so much wine, so you should take a big gulp of that small amount that you have and not sip it, so that you'll get the full effect. Rava akasa de birkasa agma gemue. And Rava, therefore, whenever he would make a bracha on a kos, let's say for Kiddush or for Birkas Hamazon, he would make sure to take a big gulp because he wanted to give proper kavod to that bracha. Darash Rava may dichsiv mayafufa mayach bane olim bas nadiv. So Rava now expounds on the following pasuk in Shir Hashirim. It says, "How beautiful are your steps in the shoes, O daughter of the benevolent one." Nadiv, the daughter of the benevolent one. Mayafufa amosein shel Yisrael b'shosh olin l'regel. So the first part of the pasuk, how beautiful are your steps, refers to the steps, the footsteps of the Jewish people when they make Aliyah l'regel, when they go up to Jerusalem 3 times a year. And Bas Nadiv, what does it mean, the daughter of the benevolent one? Bito shel Avraham Avinu shenikra Nadiv, the daughter of Abraham, who was called the benevolent one, or the volunteer. The person who steps up for the first time without being instigated at all, completely of his own volition. Shenemar nidivei amim na'asafu am Elokei Avraham. This pasuk looks familiar. We say it 7 times before Tekiah Shofar and Rosh Hashanah. It says nidivei amim na'asafu. The benevolent ones of the nations gather for the nation of the God of Abraham. Now, why are we called in this pasuk the nation of the God of Abraham? Elokei Avraham v'lo Elokei Yitzchak v'Yankiv. Why are we only called the nation of Abraham and not the nation of Yitzchak and Yaakov? Ela Elokei Avraham shayetechila legerim. But rather, we're called, if you want to ascribe benevolence or volunteerism to the Jewish people, that's associated with Avram Avinu. Yitzchak had a father who was from. Yaakov had a father and a grandfather who was from. So it was, they were not the ones who stepped forward and completely of their own volition stepped forward for Hashem. It's only Avram Avinu who has that initial start, is a self-made man, so to speak, right? And therefore, that's why we're called the Bas Nadiv. We're called the people who step forward of our own volition. Tana Devei Rav Anon, Mai Dichsiv Chamukei Rechayach. Let's go back to that pasuk that we saw before, but now we're going to look at it from a different perspective. Remember, we talked about the hidden parts of your thigh are like an adornment. Lama Nimshlu Divrei Torah Kiyarch. So here, Kamo Chalaim, the word Chalaim, Rashi says, is being translated as from the word Luchos, like the tablets. Why are the words of Torah on the luchos compared to the hidden parts of the thigh? Lomar lecha ma yerech baseser af divrei Torah baseser. To tell you that just like the thigh is a hidden part of the body, it's concealed, thankfully, so too the words of Torah have to be concealed. What does that mean? So Rashi says, there could be a number of ways of explaining this. It could mean that you're not supposed to reveal esoteric concepts of the Torah publicly. But Rashi has a more straightforward explanation. It means that even when you're teaching Torah publicly, it should be done with modesty. It shouldn't be done like you don't go out with a megaphone out in the middle of the Eaton Center and start telling people they have to do tshuva and teach them psukim and stuff like that. But you have to gather an assembly in a more humble way where only the people that will appreciate the Torah will be able to listen to you. V'hana da'amar Rabbi Lazar, mai dichsiv higid lecha adam matov u'ma Hashem doresh mimcha ki im asos mishpat ve'avas chesed ve'atznei alechas im elokecha. And this is in consonance with Rabbi Lazar. He said, you look at the pasuk in Micha, the very famous pasuk that says, God tells you what is good and what does God seek from you, but rather to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with the Lord. So asos mishpat ze'adin. So what does it mean to do justice? This refers to simply dispensing justice in a just way. Ve'avas chesed zu gemilus chasodim. And to love kindness, this refers to doing acts of chesed. Ve'atznei alechas im elokecha, and walk humbly with the Lord. So this refers to every mitzvah that you do has to be done humbly. This refers to levaya and taking care of a chassan and kala, making a chasana. Rashi explains that what this means is that if people need help with the funding of a levaya or the funding of a chasana, do it shtilahate. In other words, don't announce, don't say we'd like to thank the following sponsors for this levaya or for this chasana. People who donate for Hachnasas Kala or for the Chevra Kadisha should do so very quietly. Okay? And V'halo Dvarim Kal V'chomer. Umad Dvarim Shedarkan Lasosim B'farhes Yom Torah Hatznei Aleches. Dvarim Shedarkan Lasosim B'tzin Alachas Kama V'kama. So you can make a Kal V'chomer to yourself. When it comes to things that are done with great fanfare, yet when it comes to funding them, the Torah says do it quietly. So surely when it comes to things that are private, like giving an ani tzedakah, surely that should be done very quietly and very privately, as quietly and privately as possible. And therefore you see from here that there's an advocation for everything, every mitzvah that you do should be done privately, including Talmud Torah. Amar Rabbi Lazar, Gadol ha'osa tzedakah yoser mikol ha'karbanos. In a related statement, Rabbi Lazar says a person who does tzedakah, gives tzedakah, is greater than bringing any korban. Shenamar osed tzedakah umishpat nivchar la'Hashem mizevach. That he who does tzedakah and justice is more choice to God than a sacrifice. Amar Rabbi Lazar, Gedola gemilos chasadim yoser min tzedakah. Rabbi Lazar then further said that doing acts of chesed are even greater than giving charity. Now, why is that? So first of all, it says, Shenamar zir'u lachem litzdaka v'kitzru lefi chesed. Because I'll prove it to you. It says in the pasuk, and this is a pasuk from Hosea, it says, plant tzedakah and harvest chesed. So which is better, planting or harvesting? So the Gemara explains, Im adam zareya safek ochel safek eno ochel, adam kotzer vaday ochel. When you plant, you don't know whether you're going to be able to reap the dividends of that planting. But when you're harvesting, you already know that you're getting the dividends. It's a sure thing because you're in the process of harvesting. So basically, it's much better to do chesed, which means basically, instead of just giving a person cash, taking care of them in other ways, in addition to just giving them money, but making sure that they're taken care of, making sure that they have all of the provisions taken care of them, instead of just giving them the finances.
It says here that giving money to a poor person, you don't really know if he's poor or not. With acts of chesed, whether he's rich or poor, it's still chesed.
Well, so I mean, Rashi says that what it means is that instead of just giving him money, you give him a baked loaf of bread already, you give him clothing, you give him ready to consume items. Yeah.
I said the Rambam also said the Milas Chasodim
is higher. We're going to see that in just a second also. So the Amar Rabbi Lazar ain't staka mishtalemes ela lefi chesed sheba. Another powerful statement of Rabbi Lazar is that the potency of tzedakah is dependent upon the amount of chesed that goes into the tzedakah. Rashi says that what that means is that it's easy to write a check, but what's not so easy is to make sure that the person's needs are taken care of. In other words, you need to do research in order to make sure that you're properly providing. Just giving him a check, and everyone can do that, but he may not know how to handle his finances properly. It may not be going to the right person. But if you do your homework and you take the extra time to make sure that, okay, we've got to take you shopping, we've got to take you to buy clothes, to buy food, make sure that you know what you're doing and you're going to handle your finances properly, that's the chesed that's involved with the act of tzedakah. And once again, you see, it's tzedakah is compared to planting, chesed is compared to harvesting, so you see that the chesed in it is the much bigger issue. Okay, let's go weiter. Tana Rabbanan. Bishlosha devarim gedola gemilus chasadim yoser min tzedakah. In three respects, gemilus chesed is greater than tzedakah. And in what three respects? Tzedakah b'mamono, gemilus chasadim bein begufo bein b'mamono. Tzedakah can only be done with money, but chesed can be done both with money and with non-tangibles as well. What kind of chesed is with non-tangibles? You dance at someone's chasana. You go pay someone a shiva call. You can do so many types of chesed that don't involve spending any money. So therefore it's even better in that respect because it's inclusive of both monetary and non-monetary items. Tzedakah lanim u'gemilus chasadim bein lanim bein lashirim. Tzedakah can only be given to the poor, but gemilus chesed can be done for both the poor and the wealthy. Tzedakah l'chaim gemilus chasadim bein l'chaim bein l'meisim. And finally, tzedakah can only be done with the living. And gemilus chesed can be done with the living and the deceased, because you can go pay your respects at a levaya for someone, and you're doing them a chesed shalemes, and you can't give tzedakah to a poor person, to a dead person. Furthermore, Rabbi Lazar says that if a person does acts of tzedakah, he gives tzedakah, and he acts justly with others, then it's as if he fills the whole world with kindness. Meaning that you generate is sort of like an additional dividend to that tzedakah. Shenamar ohev tzedakah mishpat chesed Hashem ala haaretz. That if a person loves tzedakah and mishpat, then the kindness of Hashem fills the earth. Shema tomar kol habalik potz kofetz. So you might say that, hey, okay, so it's easy. I'll just give tzedakah, I'll do chesed, and anyone can do it, and it's easy as pie. So the Gemara says, no, Tamalomar mayakar chas techoy elokim. That no, it's a very precious thing. That like the rest of the pasuk says, "Uvnei adam betzel kanafecha yechasayun." People have to rest under the wings of your presence, to take protection there. Meaning that it's not so easy to succeed in doing tzedakah and chesed, because you don't know whether the guy that you're giving to is really an ani, whether really he's deserving of the tzedakah. You don't know whether you're going to be successful in your efforts to do proper chesed. So you need siyata d'shmaya to do that. Yachal af yirei shamayim kain. So you might think that a person who's a yirei shamayim has to worry that he may not succeed. Talmud Omar v'chesed Hashem me olam ve'ad olam al yireyav. That no, the pasuk says that the kindness of Hashem is eternal for those who fear Him. Amar Rav Chama bar Papa kol adam sheyesh alav chein Biyadua shuhu yirei shamayim. Any person who has this comeliness that we call chaim, he's bechaint, like we say, right? He has this attractiveness to him, this charisma that we're drawn to him. Then this person is a God-fearing person. Shenemar chesed Hashem me'olam ve'ad olam al yireyav. That it says that the chesed of Hashem, which refers to like the chut shel chesed, like we talk about when we talk about Esther, that there was this some, even though she wasn't like a model, like you wouldn't see her face on a Vogue cover of Vogue, but there was something that when you saw her, there was this chut shel chesed that people wanted to be in her company. That's for God-fearing people. What does the pasuk mean in Mishlei when it says that her mouth opens up with wisdom and the Torah of Chesed is on her tongue? What do you mean the Torah of Chesed? All Torah is of Chesed. Is there any such thing as a Torah that's not of Chesed? So, Ela Torah lishma zuhi Torah shel Chesed, shelo lishma zuhi Torah she'ena shel Chesed. Answers the Gemara, there are two reasons why people study Torah. Some people study Torah for purely selfish motives, so that they can gain honor and prestige. That's not a Chesed kind of Torah. That's not an altruistic study of Torah. That's a selfish study of Torah. That can't be called Torah of Chesed. Right, and the altruistic study of Torah is I'm studying it lishma because I want to become close to the Ribono Shalom. I want to serve God. That's called Torah Chesed. Ika da'amri Torah l'olam dazuhi Torah shel Chesed shelo l'olam dazuhi Torah she'ena shel Chesed. Others learn that what's the Torah's Chesed? That I'm studying Torah with the intention that I'll be able to spread the Torah to other people. I want to do Chesed. I want to help my fellow Jew. I want to help him, teach him Torah. So that's what's called Torah's Chesed. But if I study without ever having any intent of helping other people learn, that's not called Torah's Chesed. Let's go weiter. So we're finished with the Agadata. Let's just take a look now at this last little shtickle. We go back. The Mishnah had said that for the Nisuch HaMayim ceremony, they would do it on Shabbos too. The only thing is they couldn't go down to the Shiloach, to the brook by the side of the Har HaBayis in order to get the water. You can't do that on Shabbos, so they would collect the water the night before and keep it in golden vessels that had not been sanctified. The Mishnah was very careful to tell us that. So, va'amai, what's wrong with putting it in sanctified vessels? Naisi b'mekudeshes, put it in a sanctified vessel, in a klishares. So, Amar Ze'eri kasaver ein shir l'mayim u'chlishares mekadjen shalomidas. So Ze'eri says two things. Number one, even though this vessel may not have been designated for the purpose of this water, nevertheless, the vessel sanctifies all of its contents, even if the contents normally are not designated for that vessel, and the volume of that vessel is normally not meant to hold that kind of water. Nevertheless, there is no measurement to how much water there's supposed to be. And like Rashi explains, Shafilu yosem mishlosh alugin ru'i lenasech. The Torah doesn't tell us a specific amount of how much water you're supposed to pour, and therefore hilkach ru'in leklihem, and therefore they're suitable. No matter how much water you put in here, is considered to be the suitable amount for this vessel. You'll see there's one opinion that says that if you you put into a container a certain content, a volume of content that is not apropos for that vessel, the vessel will not sanctify it. But according to Ze'eri, since there is no designated amount for the water, any amount that you put in is immediately sanctified. And the Kli sanctifies all of its contents, regardless of whether that's your intent or not. And once the contents are sanctified in this vessel, leaving it overnight makes it become pasul belina. It becomes disqualified through a process of anything that is sanctified that lays overnight cannot be used anymore in the Mizbeach. So the Gemara therefore says, V'maisi b'mekudeshes ifsilu luhu belina. That's what I just spoke out. Chizkiya says no. Klei sharis ein mekachin elamidas. Chizkiya says no. That's not actually correct, because the reality is that a ministering vessel, a kli sharis, does not sanctify its contents unless you specifically have that in mind. However, by putting it into a ministering vessel which normally contains sanctified items, people will think that the water was sanctified for some other purpose, and therefore by you pouring it on the Mizbeach in the morning, people will think that it's okay to take liquids that have been sanctified are subject to lina, and that's going to create it's going to create a distortion of the reality. People will misperceive the reality. People will think that liquids that were left overnight that were sanctified do not become pasul belina, and that's going to create a terrible thing. Amar Rabbi Yanai, Amar Rabbi Zera, Afilu tema yeshir l'mayim uchlei sharis ein makachim elamidas. He says, I'll go even further. he says, even if you say that there is a specified amount to this to the water that you're supposed to pour on the mizbeach, even midioraisa, so therefore putting in that amount into the kli shares, because it's not the proportionate amount that's normally supposed to go into this kli shares, it's the kli shares will not sanctify it, and you certainly didn't have das to sanctify it, so that's another reason why the kli shares will not sanctify the contents, and still but people will think that even though this is not the normal volume of things that are supposed to go in this kli shares, people will think maybe this water is not meant to be used for the libation. Maybe this water is supposed to be used for washing the Kohen's hands and feet, because the Kohen would have a special kli that had been designated for the water to wash his hands and feet, separate from the water of the laver. And then people will say, oh, they're taking that water for the Kohen Gadol and they're pouring it on the Mizbeach. So we see that there's no such thing as something that became Pasal Belina.
So he says no Nisach Maim on Shabbos? Is that what he's saying?
No. So the conclusion of the Gemara is, put it in a non-sanctified vessel. People will see that this vessel is not the standard Kli Shares.
I thought the shear makes sense.
No.
No, he said there's Gezerah and everything. No, he says
the Gezerah is, you can't put it in a Kli Shares. Put it in a non-Kli Shares. Apparently, you have to say that the Kli Shares had a certain appearance to it. Either it was stamped like this is a Kli Shares, or it had a certain shape that everyone knew that this was a special Kli Shares that was used in the Beis HaMikdash. We take a Kli that looks totally different from all of the other Kalim that are Kli Shares in the Beis HaMikdash.
Styrofoam.
Well, it has to be made out of gold. It has to be made out of gold, but it's probably a different shape, a different size, whatever it is. And as a result, we know that this is not something that's sanctifying the water, because even though the Kli Shares will not sanctify its contents, because number one, it's the wrong volume, and number two, you didn't have it in mind to sanctify it, but people will get the wrong perception. They'll perceive that perhaps this water was set aside for the washing of the Kohen Gadol's hands and feet. And then you change your mind and you're using it for Nisach HaMayim, and they'll think that it was sanctified. Anyway, bottom line is, that's the reason why it has to be put into a non-normative vessel. Have a wonderful day.